So can we start? We are live.
Go ahead, start.
Thank you. So good evening, doctors. I'm Dr. Prachi from Shield Healthcare and very pleased to welcome you all. And thank you very much for joining today's webinar. So little. So under the aegis of AGOG and Shield Healthcare, together we are organizing this TAS webinar series. I have a short video on AGOG. So we have trending as expert series. The trending topics are identified, and that is how we conduct this webinars. And I'm very privileged and honored to introduce Dr. Niranjan Chavan sir, who is the convener of this trending series. Sir is at Unit Chief, LTMMC and LTMGH San Hospital, Joint Treasurer Foxy till 2024, and the Vice President MOGS till 2022. Sir has many publications and Sir had given many talks as a guest speakers on various platforms. And with this, I'm inviting Sir and request Sir to introduce our chief guest and guest of honors. So over to you and thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Prachi. I would like to thank Shield Connect for this wonderful trending task series. Today we are having the trending task series number 5. It's every fortnight on Wednesday, 5 p.m. And I'm really happy to have all of you there. Thank you. Because of you, we are all trending. And the topic for today are very interesting. And I would like to introduce now my teacher from Wadia Hospital 35 years ago. I saw a Bawa. Well, you can say anything to me, sir, now. But a very fair guy. And he had his own way of walking style and coming in Wadia. Always in suit and boot. Always immaculately dressed. And a father figure to all of us. The way he used to conduct his lectures along with Naina madam is quite nostalgic. In those days, we had wonderful teachers like Dr. Meru Ansotia, Adi Dastur. We had Dr. Manju Matalia, Vandana Valvekar, and so many of them. Sir has been at the helm of affairs of CPS, the College of Physicians and Surgeons. It has been there for more than 100 years. And I want to take this opportunity to tell all of you that in the early 1970s, he started the first endoscopic training program in Wadia Hospital and started doing endoscopy along with Dr. Narges Motashaw, madam. They were the pioneers in starting endoscopy, and that's why we have got Sir today to be there chairing and also being the chief guest. He has held many positions, namely, we can say the Dean of Wadia Hospital as an honorary professor. He is going to Bridge Candy, BD Petit Parsi General Hospital, Bhatia Hospital. He has also been the past president of IAGE, that is the Gynae Endoscopic Association of India. ISPAT has a very keen interest in perinatology and endoscopy. He is also the past president of our Mumbai Obstetric Gynec Society in 1997, where I first joined as a member of the managing committee. And he has also been the past chair of the norms and nomenclature committee of Foxy and vice president of Foxy. Sir, thank you for coming today and accepting. I would request you to please say a few words and guide on this program.
Niranjan, Dr. Uma has joined.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. Namaste, sir.
Namaste. All the best to you.
Hi, Dr. Adi. How are you?
Very good.
Dr. Dasur, requesting to share a few thoughts with us.
On today's subject, well, endoscopy was a change from the earlier times. The only constant in this world is change. And the Motasha was the one who had friends in Germany who were the pioneers in endoscopy, Dr. Kurt Sem, who happened to have a brother who was a medical bioengineer. And they were the ones who began developing the endoscopes, and Madam would go to Germany and pick up some instruments from there and bring them. And I was the only one who could handle the instruments physically, wash them in the basin, keep them nicely in the formalin plastic box, and help her out with the instruments first. And that's how we began doing endoscopy in the past with Dr. Motasha. Well, Motasha is still around. She's 94 plus and she's keeping okay in her health. And we meet her off and on. And she was the charming lady of endoscopy. She was the one who, when she spoke, the whole world listened. And when they made the first association of endoscopy for gynecology in the world, she was enthroned as the president, because everybody in the world thought that she was the pioneer and she was very good in it. So this was the system which we had in the olden days. And then gradually from watching the instruments, I got to assisting her, and then assisting. She would say, oh, okay, tuja trocar nak and to Berry's needle nak and pneumoperitoneum car and make me start the scopies. And then I would take over gradually and she would rest and take it easy. So endoscopy had a very good beginning in the KEM Wadia complex. And there was a team of Dr. Nargish Motasha in the KEM and Wadia group, and Dr. Dina Patel and Mahendra Parikh in the Wadia hospital, who began doing laparoscopic female tubal sterilizations in the rural setting in India in camps. We would go on a Friday evening or something, set everything up, and Saturday, Sunday, do about 300-400 cases a day and come back on Sunday evening or Monday night. So that was the program also where you were set up, which was a very popular program. And then the American companies, KLI and other companies, made special suitcase units for the camps where they would have the cautery unit, the pneumo unit, and the insufflation, all of them together in one suitcase, kind of a structure which would carry and put it in next to the bed and do it in the camp settings. Endoscopy had a very, very interesting beginning. And I won't take more of the time of the speakers. I think as we go on, we'll have more discussions to also make. So let's carry on with the program further.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the pearls of wisdom, sir. It was quite nostalgic to hear from you. And Dr. Motasha is in good health. We are very happy to hear from you. Thank you so much. Now I call upon our guest of honors. There are two Archanas. Well, without Archanas, we cannot start the program. Thank you. Thank you, both of you. One is Dr. Baser. She has been practicing for last 33 years in India and in UK. She is the Foxy Vice President, has her own hospital in Indore, and was the chairperson of the Imaging Science Committee. She has a Guinness World Record in 2007, is also a fellow representative of AICC RCOG, has core interest in laparoscopy, ultrasound, and painless delivery. Welcome, madam, for this wonderful program of Rending Task. We request you to please say a few words.
Thank you, Niranjan. Good evening to everyone. It's always a pleasure to be here as a guest of honor, and I'm really honored to be a guest of honor in a session where Professor Adi Dastur and Professor P.K. Shah are there present. because I remember my days in Wadia when I connected to Niranjan also. First time I saw fetus inside was Professor Adi Dastur putting his scope inside the belly of a woman. I mean, that was amazing. And I mean, that led me to, do my MRCOG and get into fetal medicine. And the second person who pushed me into imaging science is Dr. P.K. Shah. I think he is the one who I've been associated for last 25, 30 years now, and very great association. And it's always pleasure to hear Dr. P.K. Shah here. And I mean, the series which you have started, Niranjan, is amazing. I mean, you're a great teacher. And it is always good to be on your program and listen to you. And the way you conduct the programs, they are very, very popular. And I've been checking with the PG students, and even my daughter, she has been postgraduate, and she said very good lecture series is Dr. Niranjan Chauhan does. So all the very best for your programs, and I'm really honored to be here. And it's nice to see Professor Adi Dastur, Dr. P.K. Shah, and my, the current Vice President, Dr. Archana Verma, and another speakers as well. And good evening to all the delegates, and I'm sure you will get benefited by two powerful lectures here today. So thank you very much, Niranjan.
Yes, madam, and we want you to be there to give your expert comments and also participate in the discussion. This is Trending Task, and that's why you are being here. Thank you so much for accepting this invitation. Well, we have now an amazing personality. She is a heartthrob of Foxy. I can say very hardworking, a persistent lady. I have seen her working in Foxy as a chairman of Public Awareness Committee, as president of Ghaziabad Society, and now she is the president. The way she conducts her society, she is in charge of approximately 50 to 60 societies under her wings, and she has a tremendous power of getting people involved, coming together, a good hold on Shero Shairi, poems, and Hindi, our national language. She's been a faculty for more than 300 plus national and international conferences and CMEs. She has been a part of not only Foxy, but Rotary, Lions, Ekta, Udan, and also was the organizing chairperson of the UP COP 2020. I can go on and on. Madam, I request you to please guide us for this Trending Task Series 5.
Thank you, Dr. Niranjan. I just can say only one thing, really dreams comes true. I was today our chief guest, Dr. Adi Dastur. For years, I have been dreaming, can I have a word with sir, or I can see him in the same platform. It is something unbelievable. So today, this day, I will remember forever. And Adi sir, my salute to you, and sir, please give your blessings.
The pleasure is entirely mine. Don't worry, I was wanted to meet you.
Yes, sir. And Dr. Niranjan, I must say that trending is the word nowadays new. It is new normal, and everybody is looking for the trend setter. And you are the great personality of the Foxy, I think. And you have taken out this series. This is something as Dr. Shah will also agree with me, this trend setting is something very unique. No one has this capability. And teacher, the best teachers you have today, Dr. Adi sir, Dr. P.K. Shah, Dr. Ruma Sinha, and Dr. Archana Basir. I must say that teacher is we have a miracle of it's like God. We have, they engineer the students' mind like what even the IITian cannot do to the machines. They do forever. They just do the brain storming engineering forever, and then they leave the student, just like you are saying, the Dr. Adi Dastur was to you, and the pupil, they see that the teachers are the perfect persons for this. But something, this new trend technology, they are really need of the hour. And because the hysterectomy was one of the most common surgery being done, and various routes have been since sages, some abdominal and then laparoscopic and plus vaginal hysterectomy combined, and then only laparoscopic, then detailed laparoscopic, and then robotic. And because we know that though this technology is there with unique challenges, we must know what challenges can be there, the maintenance cost, the decision taking is very, very difficult, and learning and team making is also very, very difficult. And ultrasound training is something when teacher like Dr. P.K. Shah, even when we see the slides he uses, the way he speaks, it is this knowledge and both are mixed so much with within I think with one lecture one feels so confident, now I can do the ultrasound. So this is the value of a good teacher. So thank you Niranjan for making me, and this guest of honor is something, you know, it is I was always, whenever I was toddler in a Foxy, I was used to see ye jo guest of honor kab banungi main. So Niranjan has given us all the opportunities. Thank you, Dr. Niranjan. Thank you very much.
Madam, I have not given this opportunity. COVID has given us this opportunity of coming and having so many wonderful webinars. And I'm really lucky, as you said, that I have been, working with all the big luminaries who have been training in India. Adi sir has also taught me in my 1980s, and really it's amazing. That's what we have seen, their virtues, their principles, and that's what we even follow, at least some of the part of it. At least that's what we make. And you rightly said, madam, the best happiness you get is if your student excels more than you in your field and he achieves a better success. What more joy a teacher can get. And I'm really happy to see my teachers being there around. Without much ado, we would like to go ahead and start the program. And I have my first speaker today. She is a robotic surgeon. She is a trainer by herself, presently working at Apollo Hospital, Hyderabad. She has also been a conjoint associate professor in Australia, that is Macquarie University. She is currently the vice president of ISOPAR Hyderabad chapter. She has got many publications and awards to her credit, and it's been just to be going back down the memory lanes. The first time I met her was not in India, but it was having a pizza in Washington, D.C., Figo, along with Dr. Shirish Shet sir. And that's where I met madam. I don't know whether you recollect this, madam, but that was a nostalgic moment when we had gone to Washington, D.C. for Figo. And that's how we got together to know each other. And now you have been doing a wonderful job. And I think there is no better person presently in India who can teach the nuances of robotic surgery. I recollect robotic surgery coming to India, and the proponents used to only talk about cancer surgery, used in oncology, used in urogynecology and others. But I think, madam, you have made that mark now and have surely said that yes, it can be used for benign surgeries. And today you are going to speak on that. I thank you for accepting this invitation, and without much taking valuable time, please, madam, you can start your lecture. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Niranjan. Thank you so much. It's really a privilege to be together in this lecture series with Professor Adi Dastur, Professor Shah, Dr. Archana Verma, and Dr. Archana Basar, and of course you. I do remember that evening we had the pizza along with Dr. Shirish Shet. In fact, I was a very young gynecologist at that time, and I had just won the FIGO Fellowship Award. And that's how I attended my first FIGO Fellow. That was my first FIGO conference I attended in Washington. It was something that really actually pushed me, I wouldn't say to societies and that management, but to a path of academics in spite of being in a private sector. And I promised myself at that day that I will never attend a conference till I have a paper. So that has been my dictum till date. I don't just go and attend a conference. I always have a paper or a lecture or something of that sort at the moment. So thank you so much. I will begin by, can I start sharing my screen?
Yes, madam.
Yes. All So actually, Dr. Adi Dastur, you were very right in trying to reminiscence what Dr. Motasha brought to India regarding the endoscopy. In fact, that was probably the beginning of endoscopy in the whole world. And we are proud that some of our seniors who actually came in and brought these technologies so way back and showed us the path that yes, we need not be just where we are. Change is definitely what is inevitable, and we must embrace where we think the change is going to make a difference to our practice and our patients. So are we reshaping the future of surgery by the use of robotic surgery today? You are very right, Niranjan. I don't do cancer surgery. I am a benign gynecological surgeon. And when I was in front of this technology 9 years ago, I started thinking, do I need to learn it? I am a good laparoscopic surgeon. I do most of my work laparoscopically. What am I going to gain? And I audited myself. I looked around and I thought, yeah, let me give a 6 months trial and see whether I'm going to make a difference in my surgical practice. And there was no turning back from there. As Dr. Dastur was trying to reminiscence, yes, although we did have laparoscopy very, very long time ago, but I think the game changer were two in gynecological. One was the introduction of video laparoscopy by Dr. Karman Nizar. Till the video laparoscopy was introduced, it was very difficult to do as well as teach. And once the video laparoscopy, the teaching became so easy and so many more surgeons picked up the art. And of course, the first laparoscopic hysterectomy, Dr. Archana was right in saying hysterectomy is something which is done by various modalities, but I still have only one point to make here. The point is that if a woman needs a benign hysterectomy, today, we probably should not be getting challenged by a two-dimensional optics, straight stick laparoscopic skills, long learning curve, chance of conversion, difficult suturing to limit us in doing open surgery. So today we actually doing open gynecological surgery, I would say, which with a myriad of excellent laparoscopic surgeons available in our country should raise an ethical issue when laparoscopy is feasible. But the question arises, can all surgeries and can all surgeons do all surgeries laparoscopically? The challenges we just saw with the two-dimensional long learning curve and things like that. And so today with robotics is an enabling technology. It's just a tool in your hand. It is not that we are doing something really hi-fi. It's the same laparoscopic surgery, but with an advanced computer-assisted surgery. So we are able to push our envelope with robotics. So as I said, my journey started almost 9 years back. I was fresh out of my mentorship, and this was my first patient with a large fibroid. Well, her hemoglobin was low. She was counseled for hysterectomy, not myomectomy. She was 34 years, unmarried, wanted to preserve her uterus, and that also for open. She only told me two things. Ma'am, I don't want an open hysterectomy, and I don't want an open surgery. In fact, as serendipity it with, she actually had my same name. She was also Ruma. And I said, okay, this is the large fibroid. I'm not very adept in doing such large fibroids with laparoscopy. I do a LAMP technique, but I've learned something new. Would you be my first patient? And so a giant fibroid myomectomy became a small step in adopting robotics in my clinical practice. So let's start beginning of how robotics has changed my scene in myomectomy, because one size doesn't fit all. When do we attempt minimal access surgery will depend upon the size, location, number. Evidence says more than 10 centimeter, don't do laparoscopic myomectomy. 4 to 6 numbers are the ideal locations. But in our unit today in Apollo, we set no guidelines. We have no limitation of the number, location, or anything in myomectomy. But we do remember that all myomectomies are still not robotic or lap. We also have hand-assisted. We also had hybrid myomectomy. So we have 4 or 5 techniques. Our thought process is simple. We do a pre-op evaluation, talk to the patient, think of how we should do that myomectomy so that the myomectomy limits itself in 3 to 3.5 hours. We don't believe in doing 6 hours or 7 hours of surgery just because we have a point to prove to either we want to do robotic or lap or whatever it is. Because we know the 30-day post-operative outcome is much better if the time is less. So very early in our practice, we presented this paper in AAGL where we compared our laparoscopic surgery myomectomy to robotic myomectomy, and found that although we took, this is very early, the first 2 or 3 years, you can imagine we were still in the learning curve of our robotics, but we were proficient laparoscopic surgeons. So our operative time was high. But what was encouraging by this data was my length of stay reduced, my blood loss reduced, fibroid weight and numbers were much more in a robotic surgery. So that armed me with the confidence that yes, in a complex myomectomy, I can probably advance. So what is the advantage? The technique, myoma extraction, uterine reconstruction, and of course, in a complex situation, I push the envelope. In extraction of myoma, you will remember, I've just put a small video here in the corner just to compare it to a lap myomectomy. We are routinely doing lap myomectomy in our unit as well. But remember, today myomectomy is much more than traction, counter traction, and somehow suturing in 2 layers. We need to be infracapsular. We need to save the pseudocapsule because it has, we know, we have a vascular network, neuroendocrine bundle, which mediates inflammation and wound healing. A gentle myomectomy by coagulating and cutting these fibrous bundles, as you can see, is what we call as the push, toggle, pee and spread and toggle technique. This is our technique in our doing robotic myomectomy. The second part is when we want to save the endometrium. Now you can see there's just a small differentiation between the endometrium and the myomectomy. So sharp, simple sutures will go a long way in preserving the endometrium, which is, we all know is important in an infertile patient. But if it damages, we say, oh, it doesn't matter, it did happen, it's okay. But if we can save it, that would be the ideal. So we preserve the neurovascular bundles while doing the myomectomy. We preserve the endometrium by precise surgery, by going fiber by fiber. So there is no traction and counter traction. This is precise surgery and definitely different from what we do. So that's an intact endometrium. We filled it with methylene blue and there is not a single drop that came out. Now, robotic tenaculum also gives me the desired strength. Second part is the uterine reconstruction. Now you can see this is a transmural defect of 10 to 12 centimeters anterior wall myoma, right from the serosa to the endometrium. This cannot be closed in 2 layers. We are fooling ourselves if we say we'll just close it in 2 layers. No, we can't. The other is that you cannot do much of elective surgery here because we don't want all the dead tissue. So what is importance here? The quickly we suture is the less blood loss. So the oozing continues as we suture. We normally do 3, 4, sometimes even 5 layers of suturing to be able to reconstruct this myometrium. So the 540-degree twist, you can notice while we are taking the bite that the rotation of the needle driver is almost like your wrist as compared to what we try to do with our shoulders when we are doing a laparoscopic suturing. So difference between 45-degree with lap holder, that managing from your shoulder rather than from your wrist. So deep bites, precision multi-layer closing, and of course it takes less time. There's a study here which I just thought I'll talk to you guys about, the comparison of laparoscopic and robotic assisted suturing performance by expert and novices. So if you look at the smoothness of talk, if there's an expert laparoscopic surgeon, they may find no difference. But of course, the lap novices will find a difference. Total task time, even an expert laparoscopic surgeon, is better. And that's what was my initial impression when I started using this technology. As you see, the economy of movement, the instrument path length that you are using every time, that's what manages your time in the OT, is improved even in the laparoscopic expert surgeons when they use the robotic platform. So robotic is an enabling. The other areas which we push our envelope, it could be a large myoma, oddly located, like this is a large myoma, which is in the lower segment cervical. That's the fundus behind. And that's the whole myoma in the lower segment towards the right side of the patient, about 20 centimeters, which is what we are trying to do a myomectomy in a young patient. So we're just locating where are our tubes, where is our fundus. So that's the fundus deep into the pouch of Douglas, and that's the large. So we begin by dissecting the bladder in front because it's a lower segment fibroid. And if we don't take care of the bladder, we may just enter the bladder while we are trying to enucleate our myoma. So we go by dissecting, again, as I said, push, spread, and toggle technique in which we reach the myoma bed. So that is the large myoma which we remove. And that's the bed of the myoma at the end of the surgery. And then we will suture it. So oddly located myomas, large myomas, complex myomas are definitely an advantages with this technology. Sometimes, and in this era of both lockdown as well as rampant use of ulipristal acetate, we had this patient with posterior wall myoma. There wasn't any capsule. The myoma texture was totally gone. And if I had to use a myoma screw just to do a counter traction and traction, I would have completely lost. So there was no myoma in this particular patient because that patient came with a long history of ulipristal. So you can see almost, I thought, am I making a mistake in my diagnosis? And then we found that it was the pathology confirmed that it was leiomyoma. And you can find in this kind of abnormal capsule, abnormal texture of the myoma, robotic surgery definitely helps. We can even have sometimes complex situations where you will have coexistent pathologies. Now you have bilateral endometrioma, fibroids with adenomyoma. So this was another patient we presented in the Surge conference last year. We sent it. This is our port placement. And you can see step one was to actually get these first two endometriomas out. The pelvis is frozen. You need to first reach the uterus to be able to do myomectomy as well as adenomyomectomy. So we did a strategy. We first cleared the pelvis and then we came from anterior part of the uterus to posterior. So we went one by one. So we removed the fibroid in the anterior, closed it, come to the fundus where there was adenomyoma, remove that, then come to the posterior wall, remove multiple fibroids. Already the bag was inside, collecting our specimen, and then at the end, closed the fundus as well as the posterior wall of the uterus. So complex myomectomies, complex situations can actually help you with the ability to be able to do. When we talk about hysterectomy, there are two situations in hysterectomy becomes difficult and prone to conversion. One, large specimen, do endometriosis. So in these two situations, like you can see, when you have a large fibroid like this, we actually go with a regular port placement. That means our port still remains at umbilicus. Simple funda. When you have to look into the pelvis, I don't care where my fundus may be. I need to reach the upper pedicles and the lower segment. So you can see the movement of my bipolar. It can come almost at an angle in a different manner. So my primary port at umbilicus helps me. I don't have to go to xiphisternum to do this surgery. So once I do the upper pedicles, now my focus is where? It is at the cervix. And I need to reach there to be able to open the vault and close it at the end of the hysterectomy. So doing robotic instruments with their maneuverability does help. That's one thing that helps me. The second is, as you can see, is the manipulation. In a large specimen, manipulation becomes difficult. Now, this is a patient with multiple large myomas, and then the movement from one side of the pedicle to the other becomes difficult. So that's my fibroid. Of course, in this, because the fundus is above this, we have put a primary port higher up. Now you can see, once you have this large myoma, I have a tendency of doing surgeries one-sided first. In fact, we published our technique, and I will share that with you. Then movement from one side to another is like your two hands inside the patient. Believe me, if you sit on the robotic console, you realize that just like in an open surgery, how you would have rotated the uterus from one end to another to reach the pedicles, exactly the same thing you do with your two instruments. So with the help of my bipolar, I push the uterus from the left to the right, keep on, and my scissors on my right hand keeps on pushing the specimen so that I'm able to move from my left pedicle to my right pedicle. So that's an extreme lesion. Now, after doing the pedicles, now that's the opening of the vault, and skillful rotation with the 30-degree up, down, which is there in laparoscopy as well, but helps you to reach there. Bladder dissection can sometimes become a headache, especially in this kind of patient where you can see the bladder is completely into your lower segment scar. In that, I call it a head-on approach. Now, sometimes you can't find the lateral window. We all talk. Theory is good, but practically it is difficult. So this robotic surgery is a heads-on approach. Now, what head-on approach? Is simple, that I hold with my bipolar forceps, which is in my left hand, and push the uterus up. When I do that, I can reach, because my vision is this, not this as in laparoscopy. I reach straight onto my bladder. Scissors is coming from this side. So angulation is good. That's my bladder right at the scar. And then I do a heads-on approach doing my bladder dissection. So fiber by fiber, again, very comfortable because vision is good. I have the depth perception. and I can do this bladder dissection in a much, much better manner as compared to laparoscopy, 100%. So if I have a difficult bladder dissection, I would always love that I was sitting on the robotic console. However, very difficult because often I do many cases laparoscopy still. So this is something that could tackling the uterine arteries. I call it a kind of ballet or salsa. So I use only 2 instruments, and that's how I have improvised to cut the cost. So you can see my 2 instruments are coming from 2 sides. One is doing the coagulation and retracts. Then the other one comes and does it. So it is like a kind of salsa between the 2 instruments that you will be able to take the uterine arteries and complexes. So comparison of laparoscopic and robotic hysterectomy in large uterus, we published our reports, and the only thing that we found was our conversion rates for large specimens, especially from 10% reduced to 4%. Endometriosis is another one area which I love to use the robotic platform because of the adhesive nature of this disease. I can do perfect. In fact, I'm just coming from the theater, and that's why I called Niranjan. I'm 5 minutes late because I had a very difficult sigmoid dissection with the left ureteric dissection endometriosis case. I was kicking myself that why I did not come to this patient for a robotic surgery and why I was in the laparoscopy. Because the robotic surgery would have given me much, much more precision to be able to do. Obviously, we managed because we are trained laparoscopic surgeon. We do most of our surgeries laparoscopically still because of most availability as well as because of the cost factor that is still there with the robotic surgery. We can do it in some other things. One is the sacrocolpopexy. This is one case, which one of the cases that we did sacrocolpopexy using the robotic technology, dissection, suturing at the sacral promontory became very, very easy. So this is somewhere in a urogynecological setup one can use in benign. We also did a case of Yusuf syndrome, which was, as we all know, is a communication between the bladder and the uterus. So she was having menorrhagia, and this you can see is a space that we opened up the bladder that was connected to the lower uterine segment. We dissected both of them and then did a bladder repair, did the repair of the uterine scar, and then obviously put some peritoneal patch there to prevent a fistula reforming. So Yusuf syndrome was an interesting. We also did an abdominal cerclage of a patient using robotic surgery. And then the same technique as you would have done in an open or laparoscopy patient with multiple pregnancy losses with cervical incompetence. It's the same Marcelin tape that we use, but the precision can be slightly better when you use a robotic technology as compared to laparoscopy. So these are some of the situations in which one can use robotic surgery. We also did some interesting cases. One was an ectopic pregnancy. The patient was hell-bent that, ma'am, please do robotic surgery. She had heard somewhere. So I said, fine. But I did find it slightly more interesting to do that, although this is only one case that we did. Sometimes this particular patient had already lost her other ovary in an oophorectomy with a dermoid cyst. She developed another one, which we were not very sure about what the pathology could be. So we actually introduced a bag inside and then did a cystectomy, trying to preserve as much as normal tissue as possible, but it came out to be mucinous adenoma for this particular patient. So you have opportunity to use robotic technology, but these are the 3 main concerns: more time, more ports, more cost. So we have done our modifications. In myomectomy, we have 5 modifications. We have sent it for publication. It should be coming soon in the Foxy Journal. We also published our 2 arms and 3 instrument robotic surgery technique, laparoscopic hysterectomy technique, which just got published last week, which we have discussed about how we have economized in the number of instruments that we are using, what is our strategy and technique of doing one-sided surgery up to colpotomy ring, then coming to the other. So these are some of the modifications over time we have done. As far as the time consumption is concerned, we compared our first 20 robotic myomectomy with the last 20 about 2 months back for some other lecture I did. And we can see the console time over last 20 cases have reduced. But you have to also see that our fibroid weight and volume did not reduce significantly from what first 20 and the last 20, which means to say we did not start with small cases. We did not start with simple cases. Robotic surgery in our unit is almost always reserved for complex problems or very large specimens. And then BMI has been the same. We have reduced our length of cost between the first 20 and last. We hardly ever give IV analgesia anymore. We just give oral. Patients, if they want, can go home in the evening. However, most stay. No blood transfusion, hemoglobin drop is less. So if you think you can not touch robot and remain practicing gynecological surgery, I think that time will be slightly difficult. I think Dr. Dastur will agree with me that when they must have started laparoscopy, there was a lot of resistance. And people thought, oh, we don't need it, we can continue open. But today you can't practice without it. So I believe in the next 10 years, this is one of the CMR robot, I think, roaming around in the India. A lot of centers are trying to buy it. It's slightly different from Da Vinci. This is how their console looks. But I still believe that it's like a 3D with a glass. The immersive technology that you have in Da Vinci is actually not available. This is another Teleflex enhanced model, which I went to the lab in Berlin, and they also have a similar robotic. They give you the wristed instrument, multiple ports, but something or the other is going to come. Medtronic has come up with their robotic system. I think it's already in India, but probably not in many hospitals. Some of our publications that we have made over years on our experience with robotic surgery. So when we talk about robotic surgery, everybody want to ignore you. They say, okay, you are probably doing some joke is going on, we don't need it. And they also laugh at you. But then I think the fighting part is slightly getting over. Maybe in the next few years, we will win, bringing robotic technology, not replacing laparoscopy, but at a point where it could benefit women all across the world. And I still believe a woman with benign disease deserves the best treatment. So that's where I feel the robotic surgery today is. We train students. We just got our the latest version of XI system. We were working on the older system. I am about 7 cases old in that. And that's what we are at Hyderabad Apollo. Thank you so much for your patient hearing. I will take any questions that anyone of you has. Thank you. Thank you, Niranjan, for this opportunity.
Thank you, madam.
What a brilliant presentation, Niranjan. I've heard robotic surgeons before. This lecture, you please put it, shrine it and keep it in your library. You won't get a lecture like this for a long time. The ease with which she was operating, handling instruments, and showing the exact correct technique of every step. I agree with every step of hers. I think she's a brilliant surgeon and a brilliant performer, but her approach is also very good. So I think this is a very brilliant presentation. I've heard many robotic surgeons before. This is one of the best.
Thank you so much.
It was a very good lecture, very good presentation. Please enshrine it in your society so that you have it for record for many more years to come. Congratulations. Really brilliant, very brilliant.
I would request Dr. P.K. Shah sir to say a few comments, sir, few words.
Sir, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to hear you, Ruma.
Namaste, sir.
Absolutely up to point, no time wasted, and message passed on, which people pick up beautifully. So nice to hear you again. I don't know whether you have noticed me or not, but I've been hearing you from different platforms.
Nice, sir. We've been meeting virtually very soon.
Yeah. Nice, very nice presentation. And I'm sure people have picked up something and they will go for it in future also. Thank you.
Madam, wonderful presentation you have done and showed those the videos were very classic, HD quality, and really you have shown the actual bleeding which occurs also, and the way you have gone and taken sutures in the bed, and those wonderful videos, amazing to see. And Yusuf syndrome, you have colposacropexy you have done myomectomy, you have done myomectomy on a 22-week size, a 20-week size fibroid and a TLH, and the way you have gone through it, it's actually extended. Our arms are extended. We are just doing with our fingers. That's the feeling which we get in robotic surgery. Madam, I have few questions. If you permit, can I ask you? Yeah. Madam, do you use, when we are using robotic surgery, well, obviously, most of the papers are saying that it has a shorter duration of stay as compared to laparoscopy. It has a faster recovery as compared to laparoscopy, and also it has got less blood loss as compared to laparoscopy, and it has been proved whether you accept it or no. But that is the 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 catch point, or the most important glaring what we come across, that why people want to shift to robotics. Like even patients will come and ask me today in Sion Hospital, which is a government hospital, they will come, वो इंस्ट्रूमेंट से आप वो दूरबीन से करते हो क्या ऑपरेशन? So I think that was probably even when Dr. Shah sir was practicing about in Sion Hospital in 2008. Now people come and ask, वो ultrasound machine का वो machine है क्या, वो fibroid कम होता है, वो robot है क्या आपके पास? So see how the people have changed. Their expectations have really changed. And I recollect, madam, before I ask you a question, when robotic surgery was started, and even Shah sir and Adi sir will agree with me that people used to go abroad 20,000 kilometers. They used to just go there to get that robotic training. And what was that training? That was only for 2 days. And they used to come back with certificates in their hand that I am a robotic surgeon. And this was a fact of the situation. But things have really changed now. And we have got, I think, more than now 70, 80 centers all over India. Madam, you are at the helm of affairs of robotic, gynecology. And really the amount of training which you have given to the students, they come back and they tell that really, madam is really so considerate and nice. So coming back to the question, madam, Ghuma Fira ke, we come back. Number one, whether we still use pitocin for myomectomy, as I could not find any of pitocin use or aqua dissection in your surgery. So that is what I wanted to ask. And do we still do the baseball sutures, or we just take the Serosa sutures with the typical mattress types? I mean, what is the best option given? Because most of the people don't know that baseball, going like this and then coming out. So they just want to go and tie a knot and come out. They just want to take a tie and knot. Let's be practical. So these are 2 points I would like to ask.
Okay. Thank you, Niranjan, for such a, first of all, giving me this opportunity. What Dr. Dasturi is saying, actually, it just shows the passion I have for this kind of surgery. And of course, also to share my experience and whatever knowledge I've gained. You're very true. I call myself like a homegrown terrorist. I actually never went anywhere to have any foreign training. For us, the training or proctoring happened here, all in India. In fact, I only had the assistance of somebody who visited us and stayed with us for 3-4 days. Somebody who was doing robotic surgery a lot, Dr. Meenakshi Jain from US. And we did surgery in her presence, and that's how we started. So I think that is a much better way of training yourself rather than going and standing in somebody's theater and come back and never able to replicate it. So that's how I think I would like to train our students also, whoever is interested in learning robotic surgery. Initially, you did ask about 3 things: the length of stay, the pain, and the bleeding, correct? Right. Now, I firmly believe the length of stay after your surgery is just not the technology. It's how you manage the patient from pre to post to ERAS protocol, how you have taken the patient, consent, pain management, nausea management, and everything. So for me, if you ask me, my lab patients and robotic patients actually have a similar LOC. So I am not saying that, I will not even claim that just because I did robotic surgeries, I can send the patient faster. I can send the same patient probably in the same time in a lab surgery as well, because my management is same, peri and post. The second comes with the pain. Yes, in robotic surgery, and there are many papers to back this up, is the fulcrum effect. Now, if you remember in laparoscopy, supposing this is my abdominal wall, my port is here, right? When you operate, where is the movement? It is here whenever you move your instrument, because that's how you're operating, right? Because you're moving your shoulder to move this. In robotic surgery, the ports have a sensor point. I fix my port at that point and the instrument goes in. the instrument, the arms don't move here so much. They move inside, like my hand. Only at some point I may move my hand to readjust my position. But the most movement is here. So the trauma to the fascia, to the muscle in the lateral abdominal wall is much, much less. Although we have 5 millimeters port in laparoscopy and 8 millimeter in robotic, the pain, definitely the patients do complain less. Our pain scores are much less than in robotic. And I think this is the reason. The last question you asked about is bleeding. Yes. If somebody shows me a video that there was no bleeding in myomectomy, well, maybe in 1 or 2 cases it may happen. We all operate, we know. The bed has to bleed. And that is how we know that the bed is life. The swiftness with which you operate is what is going to control an amount of blood loss. We do use Petrosin. I do use vasopressin. I'm not a very big proponent of doing uterine artery at source ligation. I still use, I actually have started using Misoprost 400 to 600, depending upon my size of uterus per rectum, just before I start my surgery. But the bleeding in robotic surgery is less purely because of the vision. The 3D 10 times magnified vision and the stability of my camera, because camera is in my control. If you see the difference, if you see a lab video and a robotic video, the first thing that will strike you is just like when somebody from, say, US comes to India, what does the first thing strike them? Kitna bheed hai, right? Because they don't see so many people on the street all the time. So the difference between the lab and the robotic, if you look with focus, you'll realize this is a completely stable vision. Here, some tremor is going on because you can't stop your assistant's tremor. You make focus and come and zoom, rezoom, but this is a total focused vision. So you are focused, you can move the camera yourself, you can reach the point of bleeding, you can control it faster. And that is the reason. Of course, every surgery, bleeding is individual patient, her disease, her pathology, and of course your surgical skill as well. Just because you're sitting on robot, nothing will happen. No magic will happen. You need to know your anatomy, you need to know your surgical skills.
But you need your passion.
That's keeping me alive.
Yes, absolutely.
True.
Adi sir, you can continue a few comments on what.
Well, I really enjoyed this presentation, and I think this is an ideal robotic presentation. The limitations, everything is discussed also, and indications, the use of the hands. And like she correctly mentioned, the robotic arm goes inside the port which you made. The port handling is minimum. There's no hematoma, there's no facial tears or extensions of the port. And the muscle incisions are very neat. And the level of surgery is down at the level of the pathology. And that gives a very good cosmetic as well as a recovery phase. Is very, very better in the robotic surgery. I think she's explained it so well. Write a book, Roma.
Okay.
Thank you.
High time.
Thank you.
Good time.
Good time. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, sir. It means a lot coming in appreciation from such a experienced and senior teacher like you, sir. It is a privilege.
Not very often.
It was an excellent talk. I really enjoyed Dr. Ruma. That was a treat to the eyes to listen and watch your videos.
Absolutely.
Very, very great. Really impressed.
Thank you, Archana. I only hope we can meet physically soon.
Yeah.
Come to AICOG Indore. We will.
Yeah, I think I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, please do come.
We'll have a session on robotics there.
Yeah,
Sure.
definitely.
Dr. P.K. Shah, sir.
Niranjan,
Yes, sir.
Dr. Adi, when we talk about ultrasound, we say it is a man behind the machine. But when it comes to robotic surgery, it is coupling of man and machine. So obviously it gives anytime better result. Superb.
Thank you, sir.
Wonderful comment, sir, from your side. And thank you, Dr. Ruma. I know you were in the hospital and you were busy coming back home for this wonderful trending series. This will be available on Facebook Live and on Shield Connect. And we will prepare a manuscript of your talk. We will send to you. This will be published in the Journal of Global Obstetrics and Gynecology in the next issue. So we will be sending you up and down. You can go through the corrections, and all the viewers, not only the viewers, but they will be getting a hard copy of the journal at their doorstep, where they can go through those wonderful pictures of yours and the nuances of robotic surgery which you have explained. And well, if anyone is interested, they can write directly to Madam. She is always available at Apollo Hospital, Hyderabad, and she has her own teaching program. So with this, thank you, Madam, for being there with us. We'll catch up with you soon.
Right here. I'm right here with Dr. Shah's lecture.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Now we move ahead with the next very, very interesting topic. We come across cancer quite often nowadays. We are in 2021. Things were different many decades back when we used to just be using our two fingers, but then suddenly ultrasound came in picture and things have changed. We have gone further to PET scan, to MRI, but the basis of knowing the pathology starts with your clinical examination and an ultrasound and imaging science to detect cancer. And today we have with us none other than the mentor of mentors, and well, I can say he has taught innumerable, maybe 1,000 number of obstetricians all over from India. I have been a witness to it for more than 25 years, where sir has taken 15 days course, 7 days course religiously in the morning or in the evening. And his topics, if he goes one topic, it goes not more than 1.5 to 2 hours. And the way he explains is quite mesmerizing. He has been the past president of IFUMB, IAGE, MOGS, that is Mumbai Obstetric Gynec Society, FOXY. He has represented India at the South Asian Federation Ultrasound Committee, at the Asia Oceania Committee, and in FIGO as the member of the Safe Motherhood Committee. Well, he has been a quite academician, plus a very just person, properly directing all the members, seniors, and office bearers of faculties, of FOXYs. And it's amazing to have sir. Thank you for giving your valuable time, sir. Without much ado, I hand over the mic to you. Please go ahead with your presentations.
Thank you, Niranjan, for your kind words. Can I share my presentation?
Yes. Yes, sir, we can see.
Can you see now?
Yes, sir. Wonderful.
Okay. So, thank you, Niranjan, for inviting me to your trending task. Fabulous webinars that we've been conducting and giving me an opportunity to talk on recent advances in imaging science for gynec cancers. Initially, I thought I'll only talk on recent advances, but then I realized that with so many FOXY members joining us, if we do not talk about basics of diagnosing cancers, there is no point in talking about recent advances. So I have combined both, and that may take slightly more time than what has been allotted to me.
No issue, sir.
Thank you. Gynecological malignancies are of increasing importance to the gynecologists as well as radiologists. Not only because of changing demography of our population, but also diverse presentation of symptoms. The aim of my talk is to provide a comprehensive overview of current practices of ultrasonography in gynec malignancies. Imaging in gynec oncology has been revolutionized by advance in MRI and functional imaging. These methodologies have been integrated into disease diagnosis, staging, and treatment. And we know very well that what all things are available to us for diagnosis of gynec cancer: TAS, TVS, transrectal sonography, saline infusion sonography, color Doppler, 3D, 4D, 3D power Doppler, CT scan, MRI, PET scan, elastography, and contrast enhanced ultrasonography. So what is the scope of transabdominal and transvaginal sonography in gynec malignancies? Number one is a tumor diagnosis. Number two, screening. Number three, confirmation of diagnosis. Number four, monitoring of therapy. And number five, post-therapy evaluation and tumor follow-up. Let us talk about carcinoma cervix first. TVS is useful in studying the size and extent of the tumor, parametrial involvement, staging, involvement of bladder or rectum, response to therapy, and in long-term follow-up. Although to study the involvement of ureters, kidney, liver metastasis, and lymph nodes, transabdominal sonography should be used. How do you diagnose the cervix? With routine 2D ultrasound. Hypoechoic mass in the region of the cervix. At times, hyperechoic areas within it. Post biopsy, there is an echogenic area in the ulcer crater. Unilateral shortening or widening of the parametrium, irregular parametrial margins, and shift of the cervix towards affected side of the parametrium due to fibrosis. You can have pyometra, hematometra, or direct extension of hypoechoic mass laterally into parametrium. You can see it on ultrasound. And in case of recurrence, it is an irregular hypoechoic mass at the vault of the vagina. Direct involvement of the vagina from CA cervix can be studied with water balloon or condom in vagina. TVS cannot differentiate parametrial involvement by inflammation or malignancy. Please remember this. That's a very typical case of CA cervix. That's a hypoechoic mass in the region of the cervix. And that's a huge mass going up to the body of the uterus also and into the vagina. But there are limitations of TVS. The cephalic extension of the tumor from cervix cannot be seen. Extrapelvic masses, metastasis, lymph node involvement cannot be seen. Radiation, fibrosis, and recurrence are difficult to differentiate, and TVS is complementary to clinical examination and TAS. It is not found to be overall cost effective also. Not only that, it is disadvantageous to use TVS in cervical cancer because it makes difficulty in visualization of the cervix preoperatively, may initiate bleeding and makes examination messy, and manipulation of the probe is painful and difficult. And in elderly patient with stenosis vagina, it may not be possible to do transvaginal sonography. So what is the role of color Doppler? It is basically to detect neovascularization, to differentiate benign from malignant tumors. And if your RI less than 0.4 or PI less than 1, it suggests malignancy. This is a power Doppler using to see the CA cervix vascularity. Hornacek and Carter have used TVS for proper staging of CA cervix. What is important now is transrectal sonography, CT scan, MRI. They are the better methods of diagnosis of CA cervix compared to transvaginal sonography. Transrectal ultrasound versus MRI in staging of early cervical cancer. One of the papers showed that accuracy of detecting tumor in 95 patients was 93.7% for TRUS compared to 83% in MRI. Also, the transrectal ultrasound is very important in recurrent carcinoma cervix to detect early pelvic recurrence, to differentiate fibrosis from recurrence, allow biopsy from these areas, feasible, safe, and accurate method for establishing a histopathological diagnosis should be considered in patients with non-diagnostic vaginal cytology and punch biopsy. And that is how you can estimate the cervical volume by using vocal software. Then what is important is now power Doppler in carcinoma cervix and CIN. 3 indices, VIFI and UFI, were statistically significantly higher in cervical cancer group and precancerous lesion group than the controls, which was statistically significant with p-value less than 0.001. And also the cervical cancer group than the precancerous lesion group, again statistically significant. Indices were not significantly different in relation to histology, presence of positive lymph node, or lymphovascular space involvement. And that is how you get the 3D ultrasound. And you can see the vascularity in this, and you can study the vascularity. Now, what is more important is that in 2018, FIGO revised staging, incorporated imaging finding into the staging system for the first time. Prior to this revision in 2018, FIGO staging for cervical cancer was entirely based on clinical and surgical findings. The revised system stated that imaging and pathology findings can be used to supplement tumor size and extent at all stages. In addition, there was a newly introduced stage 3C for lymph node involvement, which is further subdivided into 3C1, pelvic lymph nodes, and 3C2, para-aortic lymph nodes. MRI is the imaging modality of choice in evaluating local disease extent given its exquisite soft tissue resolution. The presence of parametrial invasion, which upstages the disease to at least FIGO stage 2B and classifies the disease as locally advanced, best identified by MRI with sensitivity and specificity of 73 and 93% respectively. Then it also helps in fertility preservation when we want to do conization or trachelectomy. Selection of cases for fertility preservation requires a multidisciplinary approach, and MRI plays a key role. Measurement on MRI correlates well with pathological measurement. Why? Because the distance of 5 to 10 millimeters between the tumor and the internal os puts the patient at high risk of local recurrence after surgery. Other factors to consider include a maximum tumor size of less than 2 centimeters with sufficient cervical length after resection, that is at least 1 centimeter, absence of deep cervical stromal invasion, and absence of lymph node involvement. This is a T2-weighted image of MRI. One on the left shows you a sagittal section and one on the right shows you coronal section. And it shows clear boundaries. Those arrows are pointing at the parametrium on both the sides, and it is absolutely no tumor is going from cervix into the parametrium. So it's a normal parametrium. Look at this. This is again a T2-weighted image. It shows you the lymph nodes on both the sides. These lymph nodes are involved, and you can find out what type of lymph nodes when T1 weighted images are taken, and you can have heterogeneous picture of lymph nodes at times. Look at this picture on the left side. It shows you infiltration of the cervical tissue into the parametrium on the right hand side, whereas on left hand side it is absolutely clear. Look at the wall of the cervix. Nothing goes from here to that side. This is a sagittal section on T2 image on MRI, and it shows you the mass in the entry leaf of the cervix. Not only that, it shows you edema of the wall of the bladder. Do not label this as involvement of the bladder. Please remember, you have to get used to these images of MRI. Image-guided brachytherapy. So not only in diagnosis, but also in management, MRI is very important. GEC Astro, the group of European Curie Therapy and European Society for Radiotherapy and Oncology guidelines recommend MRI-guided brachytherapy as component of the radiotherapy in locally advanced cervical cancer treated with chemoradiotherapy. FIGO classification 1B to 4A. And that is how it looks. The applicator is in place here. And this is the area of interest where you can see the CA cervix. The applicator has been placed, and you can give radiation in this area. So this brachytherapy is very, very important with the use of MRI. Then you can have transrectal ultrasound guided interstitial brachytherapy of the cervix. Again, something which we have not been doing so far commonly. Coming to second malignancy, and that is carcinoma endometrium. You must know first thing is what is the thickness of the endometrium. What is normal? Menstrual phase 1 to 4 millimeter, proliferative 4 to 8, secretory 7 to 13, and postmenopausal 4 to 8. And this can go up to 10 millimeter if she is taking estrogens. What is important is the volume. The endometrium volume in proliferative phase is anywhere from 1.6 plus minus 0.4 milliliter. and in secretory phase 3.6 plus minus 0.8 milliliter. TVS can help in distinguishing patients with endometrial atrophy from patients with significant amount of endometrial tissue, that is hyperplasia, submucous fibroid, or polyp. Instillation of fluid, that is sonohysterography, helps distinguish global thickening of the endometrium from polyp or focal thickening. There is the atrophic endometrium that you can see here in a postmenopausal woman, that is the atrophic endometrium. And then you have a hyperplasia, more than 5 millimeter in postmenopausal women, the thickness. This is the sonohysterography or sonosalpingography. In premenopausal women, the thickness should be less than 14 millimeter, 1/4. Whereas in postmenopausal, the thickness should be less than 5 millimeter normally. How endometrial hyperplasia is associated with endometrial cancer? Simple hyperplasia, 1% progress to endometrial cancer. Complex hyperplasia, 3% progress to cancer. And complex hyperplasia with ATP, almost 28% will progress to endometrial cancer. And this is how you will see the endometrial hyperplasia. In postmenopausal women with bleeding, you can have more than 5 millimeter, or in premenopausal more than 14 millimeter. You can have cystic areas within the thickened endometrium, and the differential diagnosis includes cystic atrophy of the endometrium, endometrial polyp, or endometrial carcinoma. When you see the double thickness of the endometrium more than 5 millimeter in postmenopausal patients, the threshold is based on meta-analysis of 5,892 women. So more than 5 millimeter endometrial thickness as cutoff can identify 96% of CA endometrium. So remember this cutoff of 5 millimeter. At TVS, when endometrium cannot be accurately measured or when there is non-specific thickened central endometrial complex, sonohysterography can provide additional information and can be used to direct patient to a visually guided hysteroscopic procedure rather than potentially unsuccessful blind biopsy procedure. Now that's a carcinomatous endometrial polyp. This is endometrial hyperplasia before saline infusion sonography, and this is after saline infusion sonography. This is a polyp inside the endometrium. This is a submucous fibroid. One on the left at the top is endometrial hyperplasia, and one at the top on the right and in the lower part, both are polyps with saline infusion sonography. So what are the TVS criteria for diagnosis of C endometrium? Thickened endometrium more than normal range for different age groups and phase of menstruation, as I told you. Hyperechoic endometrium or variable echogenicity due to necrosis and hemorrhage within it. Enlarged distended uterus with irregular margins. Loss of continuity of subendometrial halo due to involvement of myometrium. Dense echo complexes penetrating myometrium, that is disruption of endomyometrial interface. Uterine cavity appears enlarged, irregular, indistinct in outline. Presence of pyometra or hematometra due to extension of CA endometrium into cervix. Exact depth of myometrial invasion can be picked up, and you can prognosticate and do staging. Concomitant ovarian pathology must be looked for. Now that's a mass which is not, that is a mass which you cannot make out very easily, but it is going into the myometrium, and when you put on the color Doppler or power Doppler, you can see this mass and the vascularity going into the myometrium, and when you measure it and you see RI and PI, they will be in malignant range. When you have postmenopausal bleeding, it warrants full workup till biopsy at any endometrial thickness. Hysteroscopy to be avoided if strong suspicion of malignancy. In postmenopausal bleeding, if it is thickness of the endometrium is 5 millimeter or less, and the endometrium is homogeneous, expectant management. Focal increased echogenicity or diffuse inhomogeneous endometrium or focal lesion at any thickness of endometrium, go for aggressive evaluation. That's a typical case of C endometrium, where you can see the thickness and there are areas of hemorrhage and necrosis within. That's again 2 centimeter thick endometrium, but look at the endomyometrial junction everywhere. It is not penetrated. So this is confined to only endometrium, the malignancy. And that is the vascularity within the endometrium. If you do RIPI, there will be malignant range. And one more case of CA endometrium, that is the thickness of the endometrium is so much. But in anterior wall, posterior wall, you can see nicely, beautifully. But anterior wall cannot be seen because of the infiltration by the CA endometrium. As TBS can detect the extra depth of myometrial invasion by endometrial cancer, the dose for intracavitary radium can be calculated accurately, and the hypoechoic area within the hyperechoic endometrial tumors shown to be due to decreased mucin content. One of the papers by Schoenfeld reported sensitivity of 100%, specificity of 80%, and accuracy of 84%. In prospective study of 201 patients, the sensitivities of endometrial volume and thickness for diagnosis of endometrial cancer were same, only 70%. But the specificity of volume measurement was better than the endometrial thickness, 98% versus 88%. And that is how you can calculate the endometrial thickness and find out what is the thickness in a given situation. Transvaginal color Doppler for CA endometrium is used for detecting presence or absence of vascular signals from suspicious endometrial thickening. Help detect intratumoral vascularity and areas of neovascularization. Studying the pulsatility index and resistance index of vessels and even uterine artery and tumor vessel waves for analysis, one can differentiate benign from malignant tumors. PI of 1.5 or more was a cutoff for uterine artery wave analysis of detecting malignancy. So if you have PI less than 1.5 in uterine artery, it suggests possibility of malignancy in CA endometrium. Warren and Kujek showed areas of neovascularization within the endometrium had very low impedance, RI less than 0.4 and PI less than 1. And that is how you will have to pick up the vascularity. But there could be cause of false results with transvaginal color Doppler. Why? Because of advancing age after menopause, there is an upward trend in pulsatility index, PI, of uterine artery because of atherosclerosis. And the woman is on estrogen therapy and tamoxifen following CA breast. In a previously untreated postmenopausal woman reduces the pulsatility index of uterine artery by 50%. So you have to keep this in mind and go into the history properly to find out whether she is on estrogen or whether she is tamoxifen or not. And that is how you can do 3D ultrasound for CA endometrium. It will show you obliteration of endomyometrial junction beautifully and invasion into the myometrium with color Doppler. You have to have CA endometrium 3D color Doppler and study flow index, vascularization index, and vascular flow index. And this is how the 3D power Doppler looks like in cases of CA endometrium. And you can do the 3 indices, as you can see here, FI, VI, and VFI, and see whether they are in malignant range or not. The upper 2 pictures are the CT scan, showing you a in transverse. This is a transverse section, and that is the endometrium. And here is a sagittal section, showing you endometrium. Absolutely no breach of endomyometrial junction. This is T2 weighted MR image, and that shows also the endomyometrial junction beautifully and no breaching of that. So it's a localized malignancy. The first one, this is a T2 weighted image of CA endometrium, the thickened endometrium, sagittal section. This is a T1 weighted MRI following contrast. And then you have FDG. What is this FDG? It is a fluorodeoxyglucose positron emission tomography. And that shows the FDG take up by the endometrium. So the malignant tissue takes up in a big way, and that is what confirms your diagnosis. FDG, PET, CT scan. Okay. Now again, here you have a T2 weighted image of CA endometrium with hematometra at the top, coming down up to the anterior wall of the cervix. As you can see here also, this is T1 weighted image on MRI following the contrast. And you can see the cervix also is involved, hypoechoic. So there are two bilateral ovarian enlargements in case of CA endometrium. So you have to look for ovaries also in these cases. And this is also MRI longitudinal section with malignancy, transverse section with malignancy, irregular endometrium, and this is FDG PET scan. Okay, it takes up so much of fluoro deoxyglucose positron emission tomography. Now, this patient came following radical hysterectomy, and on MRI it shows enlargement of the lymph node and recurrence of malignancy here. So MRI is very good for picking up this recurrence and lymph nodes even following radical surgery. Surgical staging remains the gold standard in determining nodal status in endometrial cancer. An MRI with DWI. What is DWI? It is diffusion weighted imaging. Like you have T2 weighted imaging, T1 weighted MRI, you have a diffusion weighted imaging, shows higher sensitivity, but lower specificity than fluorodeoxyglucose positron emission tomography CT scan, 83%. That is for MRI with the DWI, and for FDG PET CT, 96%. Look at these four pictures of the same patient. This is T2 weighted CA endometrium, collection of fluid inside the uterine cavity. That is the bladder, that is pubic symphysis. This is inverted ADC, what is called as the apparent diffusion coefficient. And this is fusion of these two technologies. It gives a beautiful picture of malignancy plus collection of fluid in the upper part of the uterus. This is T1 post contrast. This gives beautiful picture. So now we don't have to wait only for MRI or CT scan. We have to ask for specific things. ADC is apparent diffusion coefficient, and that along with T2 weighted image gives you very good pictures. Sensitivity and specificity of FDG-PT-CT in detecting pelvic or para-aortic nodal metastasis were 63% and 95% respectively, with overall accuracy of around 90%. FDG-PT-CT was highly specific, but only moderately sensitive, thus cannot replace lymphadenectomy. Coming to ovarian malignancy, transvaginal sonography and transvaginal colorectal screening methods for early detection of ovarian malignancies to improve prognosis in women at risk. TVS is complementary to transabdominal sonography in such conditions. What are the diagnostic features on ultrasound? Bilaterality, ill-defined margins, solid echo-dense projections from within the cyst wall, mixed echogenic, predominantly solid mass, thick septi, multiloculated ascites, secondaries and liver. Look for cul-de-sac, ureter, kidney, liver, para-aortic lymph node, momentum, bladder, rectum, peritoneal surface, and subdiaphragmatic areas. How do you do scoring for carcinoma ovary? Ovarian size, that is the volume, morphological scoring, and color Doppler scoring. The volume can be calculated very easily, and there are authors who say that the normal volume ranges from 1.3 to 2.9 square centimeter in postmenopausal women, whereas in premenopausal women, it is around 6 cubic centimeter. Okay. Now, morphological criteria include whether it is solid mass or cystic mass, monocystic, multicystic, unilocular, multilocular, how is the wall, irregular, regular, whether it is anechoic, randomly echoic, or uniformly echoic. All these will give the morphological characteristics. And if the score is more than 5, the chances of ovarian tumor being malignant are more. There are many scores. I have just shown one of them. Morphology score sensitivity is 92% and specificity is 94.2%. It's a benign ovarian tumor. Do not label unless you have done the color Doppler or power Doppler. What are the characteristics of malignant ovarian neoplasm? The ovarian volume more than 10 cc in postmenopausal and more than 20 cc in premenopausal women. Papillary or complex tissue projection from within the cystic ovarian tumor. Multiloculated complex or solid ovarian mass, persistently cystic mass more than 5 centimeters with abnormal echo and blood flow pattern. One on the left side is a complex ovarian cyst with malignant potential. One on the right side is simple ovarian cyst. These projections coming from within, you have to always suspect malignancy and you must put on color to see what is the RI and PI. Transvaginal color Doppler, the PI and RI of blood flow in ovarian vessel was calculated and benign lesions had PI more than 1 and high RI more than 0.4. When it was malignant lesion, there's a lot of considerable overlap. That is why that is a limitation of color Doppler as far as ovarian cancer is concerned. The sensitivity, specificity, positive and negative predictive value of TVS was fairly high. Now, when you have a benign lesion, you put on color or power Doppler, you will see the vessels in the periphery. Whereas in you see a central vessel, think of malignancy. Again, this is a malignant ovarian tumor showing you very low RI in this particular case. This is a solid ovarian tumor, again showing you low RI and PI. So the malignant cyst looks malignant on 2D ultrasound. You put on power Doppler, you will find neovascularization within the tumor. And if you do RI and PI, you will find it in malignant range. 3D power Doppler imaging, the new emerging technology which provides additional information. Multiplanar and volume rendering display methods with the ability to rotate volume data into standard orientation. Multiple sections of tumor rotation, translation, and reconstruction allows precise evaluation. And that is what is three-dimensional power Doppler. Vascular sampling is done in highly susceptible area, that is either 6FT, solid areas, gross papillary projections, and the vascular indices VI, FI, and VFI are calculated. Specificity significantly improved with the addition of 3D power Doppler. And you can see here, the vascularization index goes up. Vascularization flow index also goes up. Chaotic architecture of the vessels is very high compared to benign, and complex branching pattern of the vessels is also almost 47.8%. So overall 3D power Doppler gives you sensitivity of 80%, specificity of 94%, and positive and negative predictive value of 84 and 92% respectively. Adnexal mass characterization endovaginal ultrasound is usually the first line of investigation for pelvic mass. Terminology and measurements on endovaginal ultrasound have been standardized by International Ovarian Tumor Analysis. This is IOTA group. And you must follow this IOTA group. ROMA, risk of ovarian malignancy algorithm, score that incorporates ultrasound findings plus CA125 and HE4 is useful for prediction of the likelihood of malignancy of an adnexal mass. Why do we need these IOTA guidelines? Basically to standardize the terms, definitions, and measurements so that we can speak the same language and compare the scientific studies. IOTA simple rules have high diagnostic performance in differentiating between benign and malignant adnexal masses. Morphological evaluation was performed by 2D ultrasound. After 2D ultrasound evaluation, color Doppler gate was activated to assess tumor. Sensitivity 82, specificity 95%, positive predictive value almost 90%, and negative predictive value 91.4%. These IOTA simple rules for identifying a benign or malignant tumor includes rules for predicting malignant tumor, what is called as M rules. M1, irregular solid tumor. M2, presence of ascites. M3, at least 4 papillary structures in a cystic ovarian mass. M4, irregular multilocular solid tumor with larger diameter more than 10 centimeters. And M5, very strong blood flow, color score 4. And that is what is shown here in different ovarian tumors. The M feature, that is the mass is classified as malignant if at least one M feature is present and no B features are present. The rule for predicting a benign tumor, B rules: B1 unilocular, B2 presence of solid component with the largest diameter less than 7 millimeter, B3 presence of acoustic shadows that tells you that there is a fluid, smooth multilocular tumor with largest diameter less than 10 centimeter and no blood flow, color score 1. And this is what is shown here in pictorial fashion, different B1, B2, B3, B4, B5. Mass is classified as benign if at least one B1 feature is present and no M feature is present. And these are the features that you all know very well, how to differentiate between benign B features and malignant M features. Just now we talked about it. They have added what is called as ADNEX model, assessment of different neoplasia in the adnexa. The IOTA consortium published ADNEX model, first series model that differentiate between benign and 4 types of malignant tumors: the borderline, stage 1 cancer, stage 2, 3, 4 cancer, and secondary metastatic tumor. What are the limitations and future research in ultrasound? Recently, some experiments have been conducted to evaluate the role of contrast-enhanced ultrasound to help further characteristic of ovarian tumor. The meta-analysis of 10 studies revealed a pooled sensitivity of 89% and specificity of 91%. Limitation of ultrasound is low sensitivity for detection of peritoneal metastasis. Furthermore, screening low-risk population by TVS may incidentally detect indeterminate lesions and lead to unnecessary biopsies. Therefore, it should not be considered as a standalone investigation to be used to screen general population for ovarian tumors. Now that's again a PET scan, which shows the huge ovarian mass, and that is a thickened peritoneum, the red arrow. This is again a lot of ascites by the side, and again showing you the tumor which is going from pelvis to the abdomen. 3 axial, coronal, and sagittal sections. The same thing with FDG, PET scan. It shows a large tumor here, large tumor with involvement of the intestine here. Huge tumor with very low FDG take-up. Now this shows again FDG PET scan, and it shows take-up of this FDG, which confirms the diagnosis of malignancy. So whenever you order either PET scan or MRI, see that you ask them to do fluorodeoxyglucose positron emission tomography. This is recurrence. You can see here lymph node involvement following the surgery. I will not go into details of what is good about ultrasound, CT scan, MRI, and PET MRI, etc. But I'll come to GTN, whereby you will see a lot of vascularity and PI always less than 0.4. The power Doppler in GTN, 3-dimensional power Doppler, indicated that there were significant differences in RI, VI, FI, and VFI between the healthy individuals and gestational trophoblastic disease patients. Also, there was a significant difference between hereditary mole and combined malignant group. Abnormal power Doppler findings were resolved when chemotherapy was done successfully. And that is what you see on power Doppler in gestational trophoblastic disease. The RI, VI, FI, VFI, you can see here, and they are lowest. The RI is lowest, VI is highest, FI is highest, and even VFI is highest. Now coming to my last part is the elastography. What is elastography? There are now high-end machines that have this possibility of doing elastography on your patient. It is an objective method of assessing the relative consistency of the tissues. It allows visualization of stiffness by color coding and enables comparison of different parts of the tissues. Conventionally, blue represents stiff tissue, green is indicative of average stiffness, and red represents soft tissue. Here you can see the 2D ultrasound on the left side and on the right side, you have elastogram showing you in red the internal os, cervical canal, external os, whereas the collagen containing cervical tissue in blue. It's violet almost. Now here, the central cavity, which you can see here on 2D ultrasound, has disappeared on elastography, which is quite suspicious of malignancy because it shows hard cervical canal, which is not a normal thing. And this is a very typical case of CA cervix, can pick up on elastography. Then what is called as the contrast enhanced ultrasound I talked about earlier on, CEUS. What is used nowadays is SonoView, which is mostly used after 2.4 milliliter of contrast agent has been injected into the cubital vein. Lesion is observed continuously for over 3 minutes. And this is a contrast in endometrial hyperplasia. As you can see here in this particular picture, you can beautifully see the contrast when you are studying for 3 minutes. And this is the endometrial malignancy, the irregular contrast you can see, early to fill and early to empty. It fills up very fast and it goes away also equally fast. This is gestational trophoblastic neoplasia. You can see the CEUS in GTN. And lastly, the ovarian tumor. The contrast you can see here beautifully. And you can't miss this because it comes up very fast and goes away also equally fast. To summarize my talk, ladies and gentlemen, TVS has significantly improved the overall ability of gynecologists and sonologists to assess the patient with genital cancer. Accurate characterization of pelvic mass enables us to differentiate benign from malignant. It's a good, accurate, reproducible, simple, and cost-effective tool for screening women at risk of developing malignancies of genitalia. Transvaginal color Doppler, though highly promising, requires larger studies before being accepted as a routine screening modality. Imaging plays a crucial role in gynecological oncology from diagnosis to treatment stratification. The revised FIGO classification in 2018 incorporates radiological findings in cervical cancer stages. Use of MRI planning in image-guided brachytherapy for cervical cancer improves treatment outcome. MRI is highly accurate in depicting myometrial invasion and cervical stromal invasion in endometrial cancer. Functional imaging is effective for detecting peritoneal carcinomatosis. And MRI imaging is the most widely used modality for preoperative local staging, with CT or PET-CT used to evaluate distant metastasis. Recent technological advances have introduced new modality like FDG PET-CT or FDG PET-MR. FDG is fluorodeoxyglucose. These new imaging technologies will aid in the process of provide a comprehensive assessment of distant metastasis, contributing to a better management of patients with gynec cancer. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to me. And sorry, I have crossed my time limit. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Wonderful presentation. You don't have to say sorry. We have got more than...
Congratulations to you.
Yes, sir.
One more master class. How about an afternoon and evening we had? Have you ever heard anybody talking like this before? I'm telling you, this is, I know ultrasound from the start, and especially for early malignancy. This kind of lectures, you have to, enshrine them. Both of them today were brilliant. And PK's lecture was absolutely classic. You cannot beat it in any field, any imaging technique. Is a complete lecture.
Adi,
PK, congratulations for a brilliant lecture. I haven't heard something so complete for a long, long time.
Thank you. But Adi, let me tell you.
Correctly said about MRI and the color Doppler placement. I agree with every slide of yours.
No,
brilliant
what is
lecture,
happening is in our practice, we only talk about CT scan and MRI. We never ever mention about PET scan or FDG.
I know PET scan is so, and Jankharia does it so beautifully.
So, and pictures are...
It's beautifully done, and the results are so accurate with the PET scan, and it is really wonderful.
Pictures are so good that even if you are not a radiologist, you can pick up.
You can pick up, exactly. Yeah. So it's evident to anybody.
And the very fact that when I knew that you are going to be the chief guest, I had to do more work. Because I thought a lot of questions will come from your side.
Don't be silly. You're just pulling my leg.
No, this is the latest thing which
Brilliant talk.
This is the latest thing which has been published in Hong Kong Journal of Radiology in 2020.
Absolutely.
Superb article. And I think each and every gynecologist must know about at least this thing. They obviously we don't do CT MRI, but we must have the knowledge when to ask for what.
Please give your lecture all over India so that they can.
I think Niranjan is going to do that job.
Brilliant.
Niranjan is going to publish in his journal, hopefully.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
for being there.
Thank you.
It's an honor to have Adi. You as I know, we were students when you were a teacher in Wadia Hospital. Yes. And it is so nice to have you as chief guest for this particular webinar.
I've been a pioneer in endoscopy, but more so in the imaging. And color Doppler, we had a brilliant experience in the color Doppler, especially when I began doing for ovarian cancer. And I found that RI of 0.3 that time we used to cut off in the first day. Then it came to 0.4.
Yeah.
So nobody would believe.
You know, Professor Asim Kuriak came to Sion Hospital in the year 2000, and he inaugurated one of the machines that was colored Doppler machine at Sion Hospital. Professor Asim Kuriak.
Asim Kuriak was my pal. He was a genius.
Absolutely.
He's the guy who began color Doppler, and he was the most brilliant guy around.
He and Kupesik.
All his baby.
His assistant Kupesik also came at that time.
Yes.
Both of them were fantastic.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Yeah. Brilliant work. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Sorry I interrupted, Niranjan. Carry on.
Questions, Niranjan.
Sir, I'm really amazed. We have got more than 2,435 members, not only from India, but from Dubai, from Oman, from Bangladesh, China, Nepal, and including Afghanistan.
Wow.
So it's really good to see, because it's FB Live and it's on Shield Connect. So when we assimilate and when we go on YouTube also, it will be there for eternity. Sir, and I was counting the number of pictures. Probably I lost the count after half the slide over. I think, sir, today's lectures, yours and madam's, with videos and the images and those colorful images picking up the cancer, about endometrial thickness, not more than 5 millimeter, including your ovarian PET scan, which you showed, sir, and the lymph nodes, metastasis, recurrences, which are occurring post Wertheim hysterectomy. And I would like to share here that sir has got a larger series of Wertheim hysterectomy, but it is not accounted, but I think it is more than 85, sir, to be
84.
84, and probably I was at least half of them a witness to them. And it's really amazing to see the way he performs the Wertheim hysterectomy. And sir, we had one paper also of ureteric stenting and without stenting, which was done at Sion Hospital for the efforts which you had taken, and myself and Sachin Ajmera was there. So I think it's really hats off to you, sir. Because of that only I could go and enter into oncology. Apart from that, sir, the elastography which you have showed is something very interesting, sir. And you have summarized that, as you rightly said, people are only just thinking about do an MRI or CT scan, but most of the people later on, even for surveillance, sir, we need for surveillance PET scan. And there are important decisions to be made. As you said, sir, surgical staging is very important in CA cervix, and also whether it is operable or not operable, sir. So the people are really mesmerized with your efforts which you have been doing. Amazing, sir. Yes, sir.
See, regarding elastography, a lot of sonologists all over India have been doing elastography. The results are very promising, but as yet it is not accepted as one of the methods for diagnosing malignancy because of less number of cases, and it is not accepted by international world. So we have to do a lot of work. It's something fantastic. I have seen Chandar and Nitin Chaubal. They are doing
Brilliant.
fantastic job.
Both of them are just absolutely unbelievable. Chandar and Chaubal are both.
Both, even contrast enhanced ultrasonography.
I call them the two C's.
Yeah, Chandar and Chaubal.
Two C's, they're really geniuses.
Yeah. Very good job they will doing.
Very good. Excellent.
Sir, yes,
questions.
Sir, what I'm asking you is the training which an ultrasound is done for an obstetrician and a gynecologist, which you have already done, sir, and people are still going and getting ahead. But for imaging science in gynae cancer, sir, well, it is a further ahead. I mean, it is much more than what basic is expected.
Obviously.
And as you said, sir, what is the best modality when the patient comes off a CA cervix or a ovarian tumor in your private hospital or your clinic and you find a mass? What should be the best option to go for an ultrasound or a Doppler apart from PV examination? So you can talk on that.
No, it is like step ladder. First thing is transvaginal sonography. CA cervix transvaginal sonography is not advised because you can initiate bleeding. So there is the transabdominal sonography and transrectal sonography. We don't ask for transrectal sonography even in teaching institutions. Forget about private. So that is one thing. For ovarian tumor, definitely transvaginal sonography to start with. Color Doppler. If you have suspicion, then go for 3D with power Doppler. And still, if it is indeterminate, go for MRI. Now, when MRI is also indeterminate, you can go for FDG PET MRI. You can have FDG PET CT scan or you can have FDG PET MRI. CT is very good for lymph nodes. CT is very good for picking up residual malignancy on the peritoneum and lymph node. Okay? But MRI, when you want a soft tissue extension, it is the best. And as I showed you in CA endometrium, one of the pictures where T2 weighted image was there, then you had
4 images.
Yeah, T1 with contrast and the DWI and ADC. That is apparent diffusion coefficient. When you combine ADC with T2 images, it gives you the best pictures whereby you will not make a mistake of not diagnosing malignancy. So this is how one should go for. Color Doppler is not the end of malignancy. Please remember this. Because I told you that there are a lot of overlapping when it comes to color Doppler indices, RI and PI. So you can't 100% that if RI is less than 0.4, this is 100% malignant. No. So that is why you have to go for 3D power Doppler.
Sir, when the role of iota or Roma comes?
It is always there. When you talk about ovarian tumor, always follow iota. It came in 2014. A lot of work has gone behind this iota completeness. Ednex model, Roma model, you have to put on their website. All the parameters are there. You put whatever you have found in your patient and it gives you score and tells you whether it is malignant or not. It is something fantastic, something fantastic.
Brilliant. Absolutely great.
You have to undergo training for this iota. Each and every gynecologist, whether you are doing ultrasound or not, that will give you a tremendous knowledge about different types of malignancies in ovary.
I think after doing MD Gynec, you must do MD in imaging sciences. Both you have to get postgraduate degrees.
Ultrasonography should be separated from radiology.
Yes, absolutely.
Sir, you have covered. Sir, you have covered ovarian tumor and malignancy in a nutshell just now. When a patient comes with, now let's talk about endometrial, sir, thickness, which is more than 5 millimeters.
In postmenopausal.
In a postmenopausal woman or a perimenopausal woman, and we need to decide now whether she should go for a hysterectomy or whether she should go for a dilatation or curettage. But further studies are they required before we go ahead?
Yes.
Because unfortunately, very few percentage of them turn out to be malignancy when a frozen section is not done, and that surgery is incomplete.
No, Niranjan, things have changed. What we were taught by our seniors, because of whatever knowledge was available at that point of time, things have changed. There is a metamorphosis in management of postmenopausal bleeding. If a patient comes with postmenopausal bleeding, you do ultrasound. If the ultrasound shows you thickness of the endometrium less than 5 millimeters, say 4 millimeter, and it is homogeneous endometrium, same echogenicity, no invasive treatment, no DNC, no biopsy, no hysteroscopy. You were managed conservatively. But if she has an endometrial thickness of more than 5 millimeter, and if it is a heterogeneous endometrium, and when you put on color, and you find RI and PI in malignant range, go for 3D power Doppler. That will confirm that probably you are looking at a malignancy in a postmenopausal bleeding. Confirm it with check DNC. Histopathological diagnosis is a must to label a postmenopausal bleeding as malignancy. Please remember this. Don't go ahead with hysterectomies the way it is done in private practice. In all of us have been doing postmenopausal bleeding, do DNC, whatever is the report, patient goes for hysterectomy. Then why did you do DNC? You understand? So this is very important. So you have to ask the patient, counsel the patient whether she wants hysterectomy or not. Don't take hysterectomy as a small procedure. So you have to counsel, and accordingly you have to go ahead. And it has been said that if you have a suspicion of malignancy on ultrasound, do not do saline infusion sonography.
Absolutely.
There is a possibility of spillage of endometrial cancer cells going into the peritoneal cavity, which you don't want. Okay, right. Anything else?
Sir, you had mentioned about sonohysterography.
Yeah.
So just now you explained that you should not do saline
infusion sonography.
Yeah, infusion. Then what about, does it apply to hysterosonography?
Same thing. Hysterosonography is same as saline infusion sonography.
And what about hysteroscopy, sir? Hysteroscopy?
I don't know. Unless you have done ultrasound, unless you know that in a particular area of the endometrium, either on the anterior wall, posterior wall, lateral wall, fundus, there is something wrong.
And if
you have absolutely no idea.
Insufflation.
Because
CO2 insufflation.
Yeah, CO2 insufflation. But unless you know where the pathology exists right from the beginning, when you do hysteroscopy, you always do ultrasound. It will give you an area which is suspicious. So you can do ultrasound guided hysteroscopic biopsy. That will save patient from unnecessary intervention.
Okay, I would put it that the ultrasound is an extension of the PV internal exam.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
you can't think of OBGYN practice without ultrasound.
You can't do
that. You can't think of.
Absolutely. And therefore, your knowledge of ultrasound has to be perfect.
Absolutely. Even knowledge of ultrasound, color Doppler. People talk about IUGR, and if you do not have knowledge of color Doppler, how do you manage IUGR?
You can't do that.
So the knowledge of ultrasonography related to obstetrics and gynecology is a must, whether you are doing ultrasonography yourself or not.
On that grounds, on that note, can I be allowed to leave, Niranjan?
Yes, sir. Sir, we are done with it. We are absolutely.
So nice
okay.
of you. So nice of you, Adi. Thank you so much.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, for being there.
God bless.
And I
keep well.
Yeah. Same thing.
Thanks, Shah sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll meet sometimes personally in near future.
Yes,
thank you so much, sir.
Niranjan, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
God bless.
Sir, thank you so much. With this, we would end our session. Thank you, Shah sir. It was a wonderful presentation. Dr. Uma madam, Archana Baser, and Archana
Verma.
I would request now Dr. Prachi of Shield Connect to please give vote of thanks on behalf of Shield. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. It was really an honor and a privilege to have Dr. Dastoor sir with us on this platform. So thank you, sir. Thank you, Archana Bashir ma'am and Archana Verma ma'am. Thank you very much for being guest of honors and for your guidance. Thank you, Dr. Uma ma'am, for an amazing talk, and I'm sure it will be useful for all the participant doctors. Thank you, Dr. Shah sir, for your talk on recent advances in gynecological oncology. Yes, the incidence of cancer is increasing in India, and your talk will really help us immensely. Thank you, Dr. Chavan sir. Without your support and guidance, the success of this talk series is absolutely not possible. So thank you very much. And last but not the least, thank you for the doctors who were there with us, who attended this webinars, and thank you for the patient listens. So thank you from Shield Healthcare.
Thank you, Ruma, for staying with us till 7 p.m.
Sir, I thoroughly enjoyed your lecture. I don't do ultrasound myself, but I totally agree that we cannot survive without the knowledge of ultrasound. So perfect. I enjoyed it.
Chalo, Niranjan.
Thank you so much, sir. Yeah. Sir, your manuscript will be ready with